Thanks for joining us for the second half. We call it Next Up. It's where we interview community leaders about the issues of the day. And today we're so proud to welcome back Chris Krehmeyer, who for 28 years has been the president and CEO of Beyond Housing, place-based initiatives, this time in the Normandy School District, trying to provide a variety of services, including housing, to people in this neck of the woods. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us once again. How are you?
I'm great, Charlie. Thanks for having me again.
Well, we saw recently that an important grocery store, Save-A-Lot, in one of your developments has pulled up stakes. And it's a real issue because, according to the federal government, we defined a food desert as some geographic area where residents have to drive more than a mile to get some groceries. Is this area in Pagedale now what we would consider a food desert?
Yeah, again, the frustrating part for us is the store had been open for 11 years and had been doing really well. So we're not quite sure exactly what happened, but yeah, it's going to be frustrating and hard for the residents to live there. But quite frankly, we're confident we're going to refill the space. I mean, we own the building, we built it, we own it, and we're confident we're going to get somebody to fill the space, whether it's another grocery store provider or somebody else. You know, we think that when we think about this kind of work, not only before our work started here about a decade ago, it was a food desert, it was a doctor desert, it was a retail desert, it was an entertainment desert, right? I think we need to think about the challenges that many neighborhoods in St. Louis and quite frankly across the country face are place-based in that they lack many things that so many of us take for granted.
You know, on the grocery store, and I've read that they're low-margin operations and always on the very edge. It just seems like it would be a good use of tax money to help out a grocery store, not completely subsidize it, but help out a grocery store that's in a food desert. Has the state been any help to you at all?
Bill, that makes a ton of sense. The state, no, but I think as we think about investing in communities, I think your point is exactly right. Look, people got to eat, right? And people go to stores and they buy food, right? So the question is, can a for-profit company make a go of it in a place that does not have as much income as others? We think the answer is yes. To your point, how do we assist them to make it happen? What does that look like, right? What does it take for a grocery store to be successful, right? What kind of rent do they need? What other kind of support do they need? Because if you provide a good product at a good price, guess what? People are going to come and buy. But we can't design it and financially like it's a place in Chesterfield or in Baldwin or some other place, right? We have to look at the economics of their business and subsidize them in some kind of way if we ever want places to get better. Because if you don't have a grocery store, if you don't have any retail, if you don't have other these things, how is that community ever going to get better? And how are the people that live there going to have the kind of lives that they want for themselves? And quite frankly, as a region, we need them to have.
Now, I was going to say, and it doesn't seem like you need to, we're going to publicly finance this place. Just a little bit of help might be enough. If it lasted 11 years.
Yeah, correct. So for us, it's whoever the new provider is, we want to be a real partner and say, look, we're the landlord, but for us, I don't need to make a profit. I need this community to have a grocery store that works and serves their needs and provides them fresh, healthy food at a good price. Let's talk about what do you need from me as a landlord or us as a region to say, we need your grocery store to be successful. And oh, by the way, did you know across the parking lot there's a bank that's there already, Midwest Bank Center, and that bank is successful. And down the street there's a movie theater, right? How do we make sure all of these things are successful so people say, wow, this is a good place to live. Look at all the amenities that we have. Not only do I want to stay here, but I want to tell other people, yeah, come live here too, because we have all these things in our life that are the things that most of us want to have.
Now, did the folks from Save-A-Lot, which is based in Earth City, did they say, okay, it's the pandemic, it's the theft, is it there just weren't enough customers? What reasons did they give you as a community leader why they were closing up?
You know, they just said the economics didn't work for their model.
Mm-hmm. Well, that could be almost anything. But let's say you were someone operating a grocery store in a rather low-income area. What would you tell me? What are the challenges for a grocer in that area?
Well, look, I think the challenges are, again, what are your margins? Bill already said it's a low-margin business. Agreed, right? So, again, what kind of products at what price points and what kind of volume do you need in sales? In this store, half the sales were with SNAP or food stamps as a function of, again, the income of the surrounding community, right? So what's the economic mix? So a grocery store doesn't really matter doesn't really care if they pay with my debit card or with Snap, because the only thing that happens with Snap, it's not taxable, right? So again, it's not that big a deal. We have a TIF. This is the only TIF in the St. Louis region I think is a legitimate TIF, right? So in this community, so we get some tax residuals to help kind of make this thing work. So what we need a provider to do is tell us what your margin needs to be, what your sales need to be, and let's together figure out how do we make that happen.
You know, in April, the Post-Dispatch had a story about you were planning another phase in the same area, and you wanted a tax exemption on construction materials, and the state said no, and you appealed it, and the appeal said yes, and then the state's taken it to the state Supreme Court, and the state's lawyers were claiming that it was a payola scam for your wealthy donors. What happened with that? And
we're waiting on the Supreme Court to send out the verdict, which should happen, I'm hoping, in any day now. We find it kind of ridiculous to assume that the work that we're doing, have been doing for decades, is not charitable, is what they said. Their assumption is if it's economic development, it can't be charitable. Well, the reason why no one does it in places like Pagedale and in our community is because it doesn't really work economically. That's why a not-for-profit has to come and try to, again, break the economic boundaries that will prevent a for-profit developer from doing it.
Okay,
So,
well, do you have wealthy donors who are making money on your projects, Chris?
No. Do I have donors? Yes, that help us do the work. Of course I do. We're not-for-profit.
But they're not getting money.
No.
Like if I were to give you $100,
Bill, I would say thank you. I would say
something
thank
back?
you and give you a letter saying thanks for giving me $100. That's all you would get back in return, is a letter with my signature on, which is not worth anything at this point. No, it's just it's a ridiculous thing for the state to say. It doesn't make any sense. It's not corroborated. Matter of fact, they got chastised by the administrative judge for even raising it, because they said you just can't say that without any evidence, because they had no evidence. They were just kind of speculating out loud, and the administrative judge, quite frankly, told them you need to stop that.
So, Chris, for almost 3 decades now, you've headed up Beyond Housing, and you've chosen the geographic area that's represented by the Normandy schools. That includes Pine Lawn, Wellston, Normandy, Pagedale. Not exactly the highest income area in the greater St. Louis area. In fact, one of the lower ones for sure. And your plan is to not just provide housing or a bank or a clinic or a grocery store, but a whole basket of services for the people who are there. And you're doing this as a not-for-profit. Is that about a fair summary of what you guys do?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Charlie, is 2 things. One, our methodology is called Ask, Align, and Act. So we ask this community, the people that live, the people that call it home, you tell us, like, what do you need and want? What are the problems, but more importantly, what are the solutions? Then we align the resources and partner with them, and then act, get the work done, right? So it's not about us saying, oh, we know what's wrong with you, and here we're going to fix your problems. No, it's we work for this community. So when they say, boy, we need a grocery store, so 11 years ago, we figured out how to build a grocery store. When they said we don't have enough entertainment, we figured out how to build a 4-screen, 375-seat movie theater showing first-run movies with the best ticket prices in town. When folks said there's not enough health care provided here, we brought our friends from Affinia to provide urgent care and primary care. When folks said there's no sit-down restaurants, we built the food hall that the state says shouldn't be tax exempt. Now we have 2 restaurants that just opened up about 2-3 months ago. Beautiful food hall. We have a clothing boutique that's going to open up. We have a fitness center that's going to open up. There's going to be a community kitchen. We've built several hundred units of single-family housing. We've rehabbed over 1,000 owner-occupied homes with mostly seniors living in those homes. We have 12 staff people embedded in the Normandy schools. We have 2 community health workers on staff. We work closely with all the mayors of these small little cities to help them be more effective and efficient at delivering their dollars. It's about place, right? And what makes up a successful place. Most of the places we live, we don't have to worry about the things working because they just do. Places like this need an organization like ours and financial support from the region to say, how do we, again, help them be successful? Because quite frankly, as a region, we're only going to progress so far if we keep leaving so many people behind. And I think we should have a new frame, not unlike what Bill talked about, is how do we invest in these places differently? How do we think about where our dollars go, both philanthropic and other dollars in the St. Louis region? If we don't fix places like the Normandy School District geography, and we pick that geography because that's where the kids are and that's how the tax base is set. If we don't fix places like that, what's going to happen to the region, right? Are we going to just keep moving further west? Are we going to keep abandoning places? That's not a strategy for success. We think once and for all, can we invest in the places that have not been invested in so many years? If we don't, we fear that as a region, we're going to continue to struggle.
Chris, I know that you were doing foreclosure intervention long ago. Now, all of a sudden, there's all this pandemic money to help people who are possibly facing foreclosure, which makes me wonder, are you receiving any of this pandemic money? And are you, in general, are you receiving any pandemic money? Yeah. And specifically, is it helping in the fight against foreclosures?
Yes. Yes to both questions. To date, I think we've allocated close to $2 million in both rent assistance, utility assistance, and mortgage assistance to folks in the St. Louis region. It's a real issue. We are getting the money out. It is harder than we assume, quite frankly. We still have about $500,000 left for people who live in the geographic boundaries of Normandy. So yeah, the money is getting out, not as quick, and we're like other parts of the region. We have a lot of money sitting around sloshing the system. We keep saying to people, you should not be evicted or you should not get foreclosed on because there's money available, right? Raise your hand, talk to the public sector, talk to nonprofits like Beyond Housing, and we'll help you through the federal system, which can be cumbersome because there is money available and you should not lose your house.
Well, who do you get your money from on the pandemic money? Do you talk to local government officials, or
yes.
Are you getting it from the federal?
St. Louis County government has been the biggest driver of that. State of Missouri, we've gotten some funds there. We've also gotten philanthropic dollars too from generous donors.
Okay.
Well, they say in Massachusetts they've been able to streamline the form, the application form, and make it easier. And they give it to the landlords,
right,
who would have a real financial incentive to fill it out.
Right.
Then the landlord just has to take it to the tenant for a signature.
Mm-hmm.
Is that done here? And if not, why not?
So the streamlining has not occurred because the state has to bless that. And that hasn't happened in Missouri. Do we work with landlords? Yes, we do. The tenant still has to provide documentation as to their COVID hardship, right? The landlord just can't claim somebody hasn't paid me, okay, pay some rent, right? There still has to be documentation that something happened. It has a degree of flexibility, but there still has to be documentation that your loss of income was COVID related.
Well, you know, the Missouri, I think it's the Independent, had a story on the money just not getting out of the system. The county's actually pretty good. 71% of the rental assistance has been delivered.
Right.
City of St. Louis, 57%. But then you go to the state of Missouri, for whatever reason, just 18% of the federal pandemic rental assistance has been distributed. Right. And some people say it's probably because while the federal government allows those who are administering this program to take up to 10% in administrative fees, the state capped its administrative costs at 2.5%. So they don't have that many workers. Does it seem to you that, boy, if they spend a little more money on hiring more workers, if it's possible in this economy, maybe we could get some more of that money out?
I think it's a pretty easy yes, Charlie. I think that would be helpful if they had more bodies to help move the paper along.
Are you kind of seeing this too, or?
Yeah. Look, again, you know, the state's a partner, and we're working with them on a whole lot of delivery systems. But clearly, again, the folks that are there are doing the best they can with the limited resources that they have.
How about refugees coming to town? I know this is not necessarily your purview, but I'm told that while a trickle have come in now, hundreds more will be arriving in St. Louis, and St. Louis is going to be quite welcoming, but the problem is housing.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts?
Well, look, it's you know, we have a wonderful affordable housing stock, but if they're coming in as refugees, they're going to need a big subsidy, right? How are they going to pay anything because they just showed up in the country with the clothes on their back, right? So we should welcome them absolutely, and there needs to be a system. I know the International Institute does a great job at, again, providing an array of services for folks. But again, as a region, I think we have to prioritize what's important to our long-term success, right? And quite frankly, it's not simply to say, oh, we have great institutions, right? We have Forest Park and the zoo and the art museum, all fine things that we need as a region, and our higher education institutions as well. We need them for the region. But we have to invest in the humanity that lives here that is still suffering and struggling. And it's not that complicated to figure out. We know how to build housing. We know how to rehab housing. We know how to do service delivery. As a region, we've not had the collective courage to say, we're going to go big. right? We're going to swing for the fences to fix the places that are struggling and the families that live there. Because quite frankly, if those places and those families do better, we all do better. It's not rocket science, right? If we help those that are struggling the most, put them in the economy, help them, again, put dollars in their own pocket, and that goes back into our broader economy, we as a region win. And we've not had the collective courage to say, let's do that. Let's swing for the fences one time, once and for all. Can we as a region say, we're going to stop sprinkling money around. We're going to stop doing things kind of in these half measures and then bemoan, oh, woe is us. Why don't things get any better here?
You know, education is such a big part of community, and you're in the Normandy School District where you're doing most of your work. And of course, the Normandy School District is one of the most troubled districts in the region, in the state. Do you work directly with the school district, or do you have anything to do with education? What do you?
Yeah. So we have 12 staff people embedded in the schools called Family Engagement Liaisons. Now, they don't do any of the pedagogy of teaching and learning, but they really, talk to the kids and their families about what's inhibiting them from fully accessing what Normandy has to offer. Kids are hungry. Kids need clean clothes. Kids need school supplies. Parents need rent assistance, utility assistance. They need all those kinds of help. 95% of the kids who go to Normandy receive free and reduced lunch. Actually, 100% do, but 95% are eligible. When you get that high, they said, fine, everybody's eligible. So what that means is almost every family who goes to school there has the weight of poverty on their shoulders. So even if Normandy had the best teachers known to man and the best administrators and the best curricula, the families are still going to struggle. So yes, we got to have great administration, great delivery of public education. But we also need to do is say, hey, let's invest in those families and the challenges that they have. Because if the families keep moving, if the families have all these struggles, they are not going to be able to be successful from an academic standpoint. All of our kids went to the same school district, right? And what we know is the turnover at the schools that our kids went to was relatively small. The annual turnover rate or mobility rate in Normandy for the last probably decade, meaning the churn of kids from the first day of school to the last day of school, is around 40%.
Wow.
So when you think about, again, teaching and learning, right? Teacher looks up at the class, hey kids, remember when we, and they go, no, you didn't, because 40% of you weren't here, right? So again, how do we stop that transitory nature, which is poverty? How do we invest in housing stability? How do we invest in family stability? If we can do that, then guess what? Fewer kids move, more stability in the household, more stability in the neighborhood, more stability in the classroom, more stability in the school district, and then the school district has a legitimate chance to be successful.
Yeah, but don't you think that physical plant is a huge issue too? Last spring I did get a tour of the Normandy High School, which from the road looks pretty good, the impressive gates and everything. But inside, you go into the locker rooms for the athletic facilities, and they're really antiquated. And then you go into the auditorium, where I think like half of the seats, Chris, were inoperable. They were broken, and so there was ribbons on them. You can't sit here. There was mold in a lot of the classrooms in the basement, and so the classrooms were, in other words, I think people get the drift. It was really substandard. And so if I was a student there, I would try and get out.
Sure.
Just because, especially, imagine being on the athletic team, and if you by chance have a wrestling meet at Kirkwood or Clayton or Burroughs or MICDS, can you even imagine? Because the stark contrast is just, it's pretty appalling. I think if most of our viewers could see what Normandy High School looks like right now, they would be shocked. They would think it was another country.
So agree. Again, one of the many inequities that this community has to face. They did pass a bond issue. The voters came out. They passed a bond issue. Work is being done on the high school as we speak. I don't know if they're going to correct 100% of all the things you mentioned, Charlie, but it's going to be a whole heck of a lot better after, I think it was a $23 million bond issue. So again, a lot of investments being made. More needs to be done, right? But again, this idea of what's equitable, right? Mm-hmm. And the same expectations for kids to go to Normandy versus kids to go to Clayton. That, to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? In terms of, yes, we should have the same expectations, but if the resource gap is so dramatic, right, and somehow we're shocked that kids don't do well in Normandy, well, guess what? If we leveled out the resource delivery and made sure we were investing in those families and in those neighborhoods, guess what? The kids will do better, because guess what? Kids can learn, right? If you give them the right context and the right environment, home environment, in the school building, kids can learn. It doesn't matter if they're from Normandy, Clayton, or wherever. Again, as a region, we have to figure out how are we going to invest in communities in place, right? So right now we fund public education by property value.
Right.
Could it be any more inequitable than that? again, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, right, how we fund public education is ridiculous. Because again, we're putting the kids in Normandy, again, behind so many other kids in the region from the first day they enter school, right? And somehow we're amazed that somehow they don't do as well. Let's again, be honest about what we're doing. And again, think about how we're investing. Once and for all, as a region, can we say, we're going to try to get after these systemic problems?
Chris, how did you get into this work? Have you been running your organization for 28 years?
Yeah, yeah.
What led you to do this, and how do you continue pushing the boulder up the hill?
So my dad was an engineer at McDonnell Douglas and Boeing. My older brother also an engineer, and that gene kind of flew right past me. So I tell people my job as a kid was to hold the other end of stuff for my dad and get him a beer. Right, so when it came time to go to school, I somehow got into Washington University. I think they weren't paying attention back in the late 70s, early 80s when I applied, and got my degree in urban studies, which my dad, I think, asked me, what the hell is that? Right. And what kind of job are you going to get? So with that job, I got out of school, couldn't find a job, and my dad said, I told you so. Right. Waited tables at the Pasta House on Delmar for a little bit, and then got a job at the Housing Authority of St. Louis County. And I worked there for 7 years and really kind of cutting my teeth on understanding, people's struggles and what poverty does to families, and how to do housing development. And then in 1993, I got this job. Again, I fooled the board of directors back then that I knew what the heck I was doing, and they took a chance on me, and it's been a great run. I still love going to work every day. I'm blessed to have a job where I know we make a difference in people's lives, and I'm still hungry to do more.
In those last 30 years, you've seen throughout the greater St. Louis area the use of tax abatement and tax increment financing, which are economic development tools which are really designed originally for blighted areas. But they've been used in many places that were clearly not blighted, some of our most affluent communities. If you could wave a wand and change things, doesn't it just make sense that those tools should be used in places like the Normandy School District or North St. Louis, parts of Lime, wherever the case is, and not some of our cities like Clayton, De Pere, and other places where they have been used.
Look, the intent of the written legislation was not to blight downtown Clayton. So the fact that someone actually wrote a report that, yes, downtown Clayton is blighted is just ridiculous, right? And that was not the intent. And is that a good use of tax dollars? Obviously not. So yeah, again, this inequity of opportunity and inequity of resources needs to be tackled from a public sector standpoint, from a philanthropic standpoint, and quite frankly, from a regional courage standpoint, right? Are we going to finally say, we can tackle these problems? Not simple, not easy, right? And it's not going to happen in one election cycle, but it sure as heck is not going to be changed by the way we're doing it now, which is sprinkling money a little bit everywhere, bemoaning the problems we have, and again, not being courageous enough to say we need to invest big and we need to do things in a much different way.
Have you noticed also that parts of that area, Wellston in particular, North Market, Lulu Avenue, have become kind of dumping grounds? Now, they were cleaned up by various groups and volunteers and even the parts of the county, but I've seen parts of North County, including Kinloch and elsewhere, that basically, if you were walking to school as a kid, it would give you a terrible feeling about your life to be walking by all the garbage that's been dumped in your neighborhood.
Yep. Look, again, it's just unacceptable, and again, it's the inequities of our region and the world that we live in, right? Why was that allowed to continue in Wellston for so long? Right? It just makes no sense. Both the county had a role, the region has. Look, I was part of at least 4 or 5 cleanups of North Market Avenue, and I kept asking, when we're done, they're just going to come back because we've not done anything to fix the bigger problem.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so now it's fixed, right? So now it's better, but we do so many things in this region that our language is transactional, right? So we feel good about knocking a few buildings down. Not a good thing to do, but we never say, well, what happens next? So we do a cleanup, but we never say, well, what happens next, right? And we get this great satisfaction about, it's even giving meals out. We should give meals out to people who are hungry. But shouldn't we say, I wonder why they're hungry and they can't buy food themselves? why don't we fix that problem while we're giving them the food, right? But we don't do that, right? We take great satisfaction. Oh, we gave food out today. Again, important to help folks who are suffering and struggling. But what we should do is get to the root cause of it and invest more dollars in that than handing them. It's the old, you know, the adage, the whole, you know, give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. Our take is, let's build a cannery, right? Yeah. So let's extrapolate that even further to say, if we invest in people, nobody wants to be poor. It's no fun struggling every day. Let's create systems that work for everybody and allow them to be successful. They have to work hard, be committed, do their part. But let's create systems that allow them to have an opportunity to be successful.
Well, Chris, you talk about investing. Where do you get your money to invest? Do you get it from the business community, individual donors, government money? Where do you get your money?
All of those, Bill, foundations, earned income. Yeah, so again, it takes this multifaceted revenue streams to make an organization like ours work. Our annual budget's around $18 million. So again, that's a mix of, again, rental income, you know, philanthropic dollars, public dollars, and earned income. Without that kind of multifaceted revenue stream, it's hard to do this kind of work.
Now, I've heard, and I think I've even written, that it's harder to raise money in a branch office town like St. Louis has become, like so many cities that have had companies sell out to other companies, and the headquarters are no longer here, like the brewery, for instance, or Ross and Purina, that it's harder. Pardon me?
Half a minute to go.
Oh, okay. It's harder to raise money now, is it?
It's always better to have the corporate headquarters here where the people who are in charge of making all decisions are here in your community, so it's always better. But we still get great support from the Boeings and many other folks who, again, have their corporate headquarters have left, but it is harder and it's better to have them in town.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but unfortunately, this half hour has already gone by. Chris Krehmeyer, Beyond Housing, thank you very much. And folks, if the spirit moves you, I hope you can make a contribution to Beyond Housing and keep that great work going for another 28 years. See you next week.